of the agenda. Are there any changes to it?
I move to adopt as written.
Okay. Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Do you need us voting on that,
We need to
Julie?
go ahead and vote, because we need to get into the habit of doing this right. It should be open. Did you get by me? Oh, you mean with the chair?
So we,
I've been up since 3:30. I've got on an airplane in New York at 8.
Good?
all right, while we work on
Hours ago.
voting for that item, is there anyone signed up for public comments today? Okay, please come on up. I apologize, I didn't see you. I don't know. Lady, raise your hand.
I take it seriously, so when I hear that we're going to privatize our schools, I'm going to completely mess with you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, just want to be here quite brief. This is in regards to Friesen and the Montessori expansion plan for D9. We have some concerns in regards to Laura L., and this is where we are at this point. When Friesen was granted to take the part of the Montessori program, the parents were told that there would be a Laura L. class beginning school year 2019 and 2020. This promise is definitely, it's not sure. There's no assurance at this time. We've already spoken to Ms. Middleton. She's given her recommendation to what she thinks that is best. However, the plan is not what's promised to the parents in regards to the Montessori program. In addition to that, the plan will also help to build the students' academics in the traditional classes. The plan that's presented by the community members of Friesen is asking for 2 Laura L. classes in the year 2019 and 2020, which is coming up. And the classes will need to have certified Montessori teachers as well as teacher's assistant. In addition to that, the proposal is to add a 6th grade class. And by adding the 6th grade class, this will allow the student to have 1 more year to work in areas where they're having difficulties and hopefully help to smooth out the transition to the middle school. In addition to that, the teachers in the traditional classes will be able to continue their Montessori training, so which means that it will prepare them well for the upper L Montessori class. In addition to that, this plan will also help with what has been identified at Murray Lassane and Hersey. I'm understanding that the Laura L. class was not tried there, but of course these averages for these schools are not very high. So therefore, we're asking that you think outside of the box for Friesen and allow these 2 Laura L. classes to come about. Sometimes, we feel like Friesen's treated like an ice cream truck. You're waiting for this truck to come down the road with the ice cream, and it finally gets to your doorstep, and then it's missing all the toppings. So, in other words, parents were told that the Laura L. class would take place in 2019, but it's not. In addition to that, the additions for the multi-purpose room, it looks like we're only going to have maybe a classroom partition being knocked down and then creating just 1 multi-purpose room, which is not what we were told and not what the community was striving after. So here again, these are things that would like to have in place. Friesen do have a waiting list, so there is some promises for this Montessori program and traditional class, and the reason why we're asking for the traditional class is because we do have folks that want to come to Friesen.
If you could please wrap up your comments.
I'm done.
Okay, all right.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much, I appreciate it. The next, is there anybody else available for public comment? Okay,
No, that's all we have.
we're still waiting on the vote.
I think we already, I think it's done.
Okay, all right, the next item up is the Strategic Ed Committee. I turn it over to Ms. Jeffrey.
Sorry, my mouse doesn't work. Okay. Board of Directors to staff for development of the 2019 to 20 through 22 targets.
So, Dr. President, is it okay if I talk about this a little bit? So, You all have at your place a draft of board directives related to mission critical action plans. And this is something that Todd and Reverend Mike and Priscilla and I brought forward. Todd probably did the most work on it, obviously. But basically, what we wanted to do is we've had the advanced ed program study and recommendations. We've had the Clemson study. We've done strategic planning. And we wanted to get on one piece of paper exactly what the board wants to make sure staff understands that we need to do, because I think all of us here feel like we've talked a lot about things we needed to do to improve student achievement, and we've talked a lot about that and we've made some changes, but we're ready to make some really radical and bold changes to impact student achievement. So that's what you're looking at today. And I think the one that you have, the piece of paper at your desk, is the most recent copy. And please, anybody, Todd, Eric, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I just want to make sure as we move forward that we are this board has approved basically anything that's been brought to us over the last 4 years. And looking at, we are making on our most recent stats that you gave me in our meeting, we are making improvement in areas, but just we've got a long way to go. And I just want to know, I mean, every principal and every teacher knowing sort of what should we expect from them, what should we expect from staff at the end of next year, and on day one of next year, so that and with respect to principals and teachers, like all of them have a directive as they go in. This is what we're hoping to see next year in this classroom. Whether you're looking at year over year, or as Ms. Jeffrey says, more qualitative of what we're teaching during the year, but so that everybody has a clear focus of what are we doing going forward.
So I just want to add that there's no doubt that we have clear indicators as to where we were as a district and where we are presently and where we need to be in order to move our students forward. There's no doubt that we have enough data that have shown and proven what needs to be done. We have the Clemson Diversity Study, we have the Advanced Ed Study, and we have the different scenarios from the future shared projects that have existed and that will be forthcoming. So there we have schools that have been set with certain priority status. So there are clear indicators as to some of the concerns that we are facing. Without a doubt, we knew of some of these issues. We knew of some of the things that needed to be changed. It's almost like a can that's being kicked down the road, and is at this point now where we need to pick that can up and look at it and move forward. So these directives is crucial and is critical simply because not only do we need staff to know what our expectations are moving forward. We talk about the mission critical action. We talk about being bold. We talk about making changes that's going to better the district and our students moving forward. And we need to make sure that that we have measures in place that as June 24th come before us, that day one after that, June 25th, that staff have clear direction as to what is expected and what we're as a board are looking forward to making sure that there is no gaps in between to what needs to be done and what the expectations are. So I think these are some clear directives, and we can massage them some more, but I think we need to be on the ground, ready, moving forward, simply because, one, in this process, we need to make sure that we are being as open and honest as we possibly can and involving the community and the staff and the stakeholders in these decisions that's going to be coming to us. We've been talking about the mission critical action. We've been talking about bold, innovative moves. We've been talking about making changes in the district. So we need to be clear as to what it is that we're looking for as we move forward. So there shouldn't be any hiccup come June 24th as to what's expected as we move forward. So I'm excited about this piece as we can continue to massage it moving forward.
Is there, sorry.
So, and while I truly appreciate where this is going, which it needs to get on a piece of paper, but I think what is a little bit disconcerting for me is we've answered these questions, so why are they being asked again to come back again? This is everything that the board has approved for next year in theory since December of 2018 in our Strategic Education Committee meetings. We've approved a multi-year plan for magnet schools. We approved a 10 bullet point process for how to make that more equitable. So I don't know what address problems created by magnet and partial magnet and choice schools are. I thought we'd already been down that road. And I guess I'm looking for more SMART goals. We approved 10 items in December that were 10 items of the first of a 3-year choice magnet revitalization plan, or whatever you want to call it. We wrote a policy for underperforming schools, and we've never, before it's even published, we're talking about going to the last line and looking for outside entities to come in. So I appreciate this, but it just seems that we're asking the same questions. When we got those answers, I could give you those. I mean, I went through last night from November of 2018 to April. We decided Lexiles were the guiding standard of whether a student needed to grow 1 year or more than 1 year. We have a multi-year plan for increasing professional development, and that's part of the CCLI. That's also part of the roundtable communications that came out of the magnet school. It's part of the career technology offerings that said, when we approved those in December, it said if you approve these as programs for North Charleston and West Ashley, we need to start with the 5th and 6th graders. But we're going to get something in June after the budget's approved, and I don't see us talking about 5th and 6th graders get the SMART goals. I see the same use of pronouns. We have CCSD went into a virtual learning partnership. We were going to expand online learning. That's sort. I guess I'm kind of questioning what is the, these aren't the specifics we've already approved. So how do we build on this when we've got? Why aren't we building on all the things we'd already approved? So for that reason, I just kind of think we need to. And I appreciate what Eric said. I mean, we have the Charleston Comprehensive Literacy Initiative that we were told in March was year 1, and year 2 was going to have additional funding in this budget, but I don't see anything in here that says we've decided this is one of the 10 bold recommendations. So I guess I'm ready for us to quit having drafts of pronouns and start saying, you approved the CCLI, year 1 did this, we're going to put them in 8 schools next year. Or the programs at Northwoods, or the teacher coaching programs that were at Pinehurst and Pepper Hill. I thought we'd already said those were the bold things we were going to do. So for us I just feel like I feel like we've said yes to enough things in the last 5 months that we're beyond getting the board to approve a draft of addressing problems. And I mean, I understand where this is going, and I think it's great to get it down to 1 page, but it feels like we're not building on what we've already said yes to.
So definitely appreciate all that you've just said, and getting ahead of and surmising what you just said. It is the goal of this board to outline and to bullet just what you just said for staff to start working on, because come June 25th, those are the exact things that we are expecting staff to have outlined, in place, ready to move forward as we have these different indicators come before us come June 24th. So this is and this may not be spelled out, bullet by bullet as to what you just defined with 5th, 6th graders, but it's inclusive of this. And these are the expectation that we're expecting to come forth as we move forward back from staff. So I'm definitely not in for kicking the can down the road. I believe we have picked the can up. I think we need to have clear indication of where we are and how we're moving these different areas of concerns that we know needs to be addressed by this district for our schools.
Ms. Jeffrey?
Yes.
Or Todd, you want to go?
No, I just wanted to make a motion to approve the directive.
Let me
She wants.
Okay, got it.
Just real quick, I think what we're trying to do here is that have something driven by the board that's a one page that really does encompass all the things we've talked about in the past year. We can't get everything on one page, but clearly directs to staff and lets the public know that we're going to continue to be making radical changes because we don't want things to continue to be stagnant at certain schools and in certain achievement levels. So I think it's just trying to put an outline almost of those directives so staff knows that we have their back when they go and do these things.
Second Todd's motion.
Okay, so the motion was to approve that.
Correct.
that.
Second.
I guess I need to join the meeting.
It's not showing up, Julie. Is it showing up on anybody's?
I already voted.
Oh, you did? Oh, I'm not getting it.
Oh, mine was hidden. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna switch computers. Yep, my vote is a yes, Julie, if you don't.
My vote is a yes.
And Mr. Chair, if you would indulge me, I do wish that you guys would reconsider the language of, or a culture that says schools have to prove to be deserved to stay open. I think it more along the lines of needs to be the adults in the building have to prove they deserve to be educating the children in that school. If we have to, school sizes and school locations shouldn't be tied to something that says the school has to justify being. I just don't feel like that's a culture that we want to
Right, and there's probably a
espouse.
better way to say that.
Right.
Essentially, yeah, we closed a school this year specifically because of its performance and its inability to also to manage its
But
funds.
because of its
But looking at,
population.
would, given some of our results, the high school at the end of my street, the average seniors read on 4th and 5th grade level. Would we choose to recreate that again come August 5th?
I agree.
15th?
And so I think that, I would just say that the decision on how many schools and where to have schools and what grade configurations are based on very tangible facts of best practices of education. And whether children who are seniors are reading on 4th grade level or not is a function of the adults in the school or the kids in the school
got it.
pick it.
And that's probably just a
Right,
bad way to
because,
have it
right,
written.
because if we do have to say we cannot fund a school that has 370 kids, we need to not confuse that with the fact because they didn't earn the right to be open. I really want to be very tangible about why a building exists where it exists.
Yeah, that is a better
Thank you.
clarification. Yep.
Okay. Continuous improvement action steps for 2019 to 2020.
Could you come and get these folders for me, please? Good afternoon. Hi. Full disclosure, somewhere between my car this morning and this meeting, I do not know where my glasses are. So if you are trying to get my attention, you're going to have to be very animated and very big because I won't read facial cues and I won't read your expressions very well. I'd ask
Well, we feel for you, me particularly.
Yeah, I have no distance vision. So I've asked the team to join me at the table. This is just a part of the Learning Services team. We have more staff members in the audience, and together, this is our best thinking about how we can really drive and strive for continuous improvement next year. And you're going to hear some clear themes. You're going to hear what are the action steps we're doing for continuous improvement. You're going to hear us turning that answerability screw or the accountability screw. And what I mean by that is tightening up procedures, processes, and routines. I don't mean nailing people. That's not what I mean. I mean turning that accountability screw means we're going to tighten up some of our procedures and our processes and our routines and expect some changes. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how we identify gaps, root causes, and those strategies. And I need to share that this work is based on work that's happening nationally right now. The Carnegie Foundation out of the San Francisco area is really looking at business and industry best practices for continuous improvement. They're synthesizing that work, and school districts across the country are taking that information and trying to nail down what it is they're going to do to get change in the schools. So that's what we want to talk to you about this afternoon. And I'm not going to go over every slide. What I thought I would do, I know you all do your homework because I get questions at night on Sunday and I get emails. I know you've done that, so I'm just going to hit a few of the slides and the most important parts. So let's look at the one that talks about striving for equity. Whoops. Okay. This is actually some work that's going on right now at Stanford in the Graduate School of Education and the Graduate School of Business. And the research coming out of there is pretty clear. Equity is access. Excellence is what you do daily in the classroom. How do you improve instructional practice in those classrooms? What are the supports? How do you get teams of teachers working together collaboratively? How intentional are you with your strategies? So we're going to talk today about how we're building out excellence. Yes, some of those directives you've designed, and you'll hear things that resonate with those directives and will resonate with some of the other work we've done this year. But we're going to go deep on the excellence piece today. If you look in your folder, and the only reason I gave you that folder was I thought there were some accompanying materials that you might want to see, and I thought you might want to see this larger so you could read it. So if you open up that folder and take this out, this is where we're going to talk from right now at this moment. There are 4 big levers for continuous improvement next year in learning services and in CCSD. The first is data analysis. We're going to do plan, do, study, act at each school site. We did that this year. That's from business and industry. But it simply means you're going to look at where you are, look at your gaps, develop those strategies, and figure out what you're going to do, and then you're going to test it and make adjustments throughout the year. We're going to do data analysis at the principal meetings. That's something we've done, but we will continue to refine. We're going to look at gaps in comparison to where we want to be. We're going to walk you through in just a few moments an example from a PDSA plan we did this year with elementary schools. And we had an epiphany. We realized we had some tightening up to do on those PDSA plans, so we'll talk about that. We're going to align those SLOs to PDSA plans, and we're going to have continuous teams of teacher meetings. Those teacher teams are going to meet with their principals and meet with their instructional coach and continue to look at data. The second category is collective educator efficacy, and that is working with those instructional coaches. That's our professional learning plan for the district. Emily Woody and her team, they're building that out. The Learning Services team last week realized that all this priority money that's coming into the schools from the state, a good thing for them to focus on would be professional learning in their schools. So how can we make sure those plans line up with where their weaknesses are? We're going to talk about that. Instructional coaching model, collaborative planning times. You've got the CEL cohort for the Tri-County region, that leadership development that Ms. Nichols is working on with John Reed and others. And then we've got vertical alignment of the curriculum, continuing to flesh out what is it that we want to teach in our core curriculum. How do we provide interventions and supports when students aren't making progress? Down at the bottom, targeted supports. We started a targeted support process 2 years ago, and Charleston's had targeted support processes previously, but we placed instructional coaches at the neediest schools. These level leaders walked those schools. They met with principals. They knew what it was they were working on, and they constantly coached and gave principals feedback. You saw some good gains last year. When we looked at the outcomes at the end of the year, we made gains in almost every category. So they've continued to do that. We're going to tighten that up and refine those processes. And then finally, quadrant 4 is answerability. That's setting up the processes, the procedures, and the structures to ask the really hard questions. And this has some tweaks in it from what we did last year. We expect you to hold us accountable for changes. What are you changing next year? Because that's what we're going to talk to the principals about. We're going to look at their data and say, what are you changing? What routines, what processes, what procedures? What are you changing for next year? So what you'll see there, we're going to bring the principals in for sort of a state of the school conference with a team. And in your folder, you've got samples. Our goal is to give these out in August when they come back and say, this is what we're going to ask you about. This is what we're going to ask you to demonstrate. We're going to ask you to bring in, not make up anything, bring in your daily work with you when you come in, and we're going to bring those principals in groups of 3 to 7 and have them give peer input and feedback, and we're going to give them feedback. And it's around what gaps, what root causes, what are they changing in their building. So you can see those sample questions. They're marked draft. We're open to any suggestions or feedback. Our team in Learning Services will be refining these questions, but our goal is to bring them in at least 2 times, maybe 3 times next year, because we want to see them progress monitoring that PDSA plan. So again, this is just refining, tightening up that answerability, tightening up that accountability, turning that screw like a quarter turn to a half turn, tightening up those processes. We're going to give you an example now. Let's go to the example slide. These are real. This is real from multiple schools. We kind of pulled it together. But we had a school last year that was relatively high performing, but the growth was below average on the state report card. The MAP data, every year those students were in the school, or these particular schools that this scenario is based on, those students' median percentile went down. So they were not growing the students. We noted that. We did have a conference with school leaders last year, and we talked about that. But this year, we're going to zero in on what are you changing, and then we're going to monitor for it. So I'm going to turn this over to Michelle Simmons now and let her talk about the work she did when she pulled out of that school's PDSA plan and what kind of refinements we're making for next year.
So, Ms. Weincourt, you spoke about SMART goals. So that's one of the key premises for our PDSA plan. Identifying where our gaps are, where our problems of practice lie, and going from there to establish what are the goals, what are the strategies and the priorities that we believe will make an impact if done well. And so, based on the example you just heard from Ms. Ambrose, the school is relatively high performing. Generally speaking, boys and girls are performing at MET or above in terms of meeting standardized state expectations. But we also want to make sure that every student is able to grow. Start where you are in August, but by the end of the year, you've grown a year within a year's time. So that's where this school has a challenge. And so the goal for the school was by spring of 2019 for at least a minimum of 65% of the students in grades 2 to 5 to meet their target growth, their established growth based on NWEA targets in both reading and math. And so in terms of root cause and the gaps that persist in the school, about 42% in math and 40% in reading are actually on track at the mid-year point when we took the test at winter time. A root cause that we've identified, the school has identified, is the need for differentiation. Being able to serve boys and girls, grade level content, but also exposing them to materials where they're actually performing. So the ability for a classroom teacher to serve students in small groups that are differentiated and targeted for their needs is not pervasive across the school, that particular school body. And so some of the changes that are being proposed, where we saw the gaps, where we saw deficiencies, was the alignment from her plan to what was in practice in the building. And so some of the areas of improvement that we will zone in on, that we will focus on, will be coaching support. So the school has a reading coach who will be able to provide classroom teachers with training and how to effectively offer that differentiation to students. Peer observations within the building. When you find a classroom or an instructor who's doing it well, who has mastered differentiation, exposing the masses to that strategy, to that practice, and then coupled with the implementation of our Bridges program, as well as the adaptive digital content that does allow classroom teachers to differentiate in a meaningful way. We feel like those levers will allow the school to offer the kind of growth, the kind of support, the kind of training that everybody needs to move forward. And so, as we reflected, as we assess our practice and how we serve and support schools, when we administer the final test this spring, which we're in the middle of right now, we expect to see a gain in terms of that 65% goal. And so when principals are charged with delivering or are asked to respond to what happened right, what didn't go so well, that's what we want to see. We want to see a principal be able to ascertain that my teachers need more instruction in this, or we need more strategies in that. And that's what we believe that coaching platform will allow us to do in concert with the classroom teachers, with teacher leaders, and with the principal, the building level principal.
And so if I could just go back to those 4 quadrants, there were a couple things I should have said that I want to make sure I say. That PDSA plan is how Japan got its automobile industry at the top in terms of the automobile manufacturing. I mean, there's research behind that. That's how they were able, after World War II, to really raise the level of the quality of automobile they were manufacturing in Japan. It's Edward Deming's work. So we know that PDSA, for almost any kind of improvement model you use, that is the foundational building block for that. Looking at what you're going to do, looking at your gap, figuring out what you're going to do, monitoring it along the way, and making adjustments. That's going to form the foundation. We want to stitch those plans together, and what I mean, we'll put them in a PDF so that any district staff member that walks that building could have access to it, and you can pull it up in real time. Now, of course, those plans change, and they're livable, breathable documents, but we think we can do it in a way that you could have access to it so you can engage in dialogue with the principals if you're out in the schools visiting. The second thing, that professional development is so important. That district plan is going to form the foundation for collective educator efficacy. Those school professional learning plans are just super important. Emily Woody's got a plan that she's building out that's addressing our root causes on the district level. The targeted supports, we started some of that work. We're going to continue to try to refine it. And then that answerability, this next little nugget I want to share is probably the key linchpin for that. And it's the fact that we plan to build out a scorecard, and that may not be the right term. In business and industry, they call it balanced scorecard. They aggregate a lot of metrics, and they evaluate that business and industry on how well it does on that scorecard. For us, it may be called something else besides a scorecard, but we want to aggregate. Right now, the principal evaluation system in South Carolina says you write 1 goal, or you write 2 goals, or you write maybe 3 goals. We know that in terms of moving a school, you've got primary data if it's an elementary school, and you see some of the samples of data on that principal protocol for the conferences. You've got state assessment, you've got MAP, you've got a lot of things, attendance, discipline. Those are all things that you need to pay attention to. We talked to the State Department last week. We asked for permission instead of writing a goal, because I may write a goal about 3rd grade reading when I've got reading issues all across the board. We asked for permission to say, hey, our goal is going to be we're going to move in a half or 2/3 of the goals that are listed on that scorecard. And the state approved that. She said that was fine. We feel like that'll give us more traction. It gives us more answerability points. It gives us metrics to have conversations around and metrics to monitor around. So those are our big strategies. And then the final one is that the level leaders have worked on what they're calling standard operating procedures or non-negotiables. And what that means is that it's a basic set of expectations they expect at elementary, they expect at middle, and they expect at high school. And we plan to get feedback. We like to use peer review in our learning services team meeting. We take things in, and our peers that maybe aren't sitting at this table, Emily Woody has a perspective. Buffy Roberts, Robin Jones, they have perspectives. Rich Gordon. We want them to be able to have an input in these. So they're marked as they're marked as draft, but we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to come in and give us feedback. And then we would want principals to own this. They're going to have to step in and own it. Now, it's not negotiable, but they may think of some things that we need to tweak or some things we need to add or a different way to phrase something. So I know that they have meetings planned with their levels to talk about these, but they're basically a set of non-negotiable standard operating procedures. And I'm going to let them speak to those.
So, can you all hear me? Yes. One of the things that we as a team, the level leaders and also directors have identified that if we focused on 3 areas to include climate, collaboration and curriculum, and we really did that intensely, we can make a big impact on student outcomes. So when you think about those 3 areas, the undergirding thing is continuous improvement, which is PDSA, that supports it. And so we know that the 3 areas along with PDSA can help us make some gains and make some impact on student outcomes in our schools. So when you look at these standard operating procedures, our SOPs, have a funny story about that, but I won't do that. We really looked at each of our learning communities, but we also thought about this past year, when we went through, we did our learning walks with our principals, we had our coaching conversation with our principals, and things that we saw that weren't consistent across all schools that really needed to be implemented in order for us to make the gains that we need. So that's kind of how we approach this process and how we look to move forward next year with making some impacts on student outcomes in all of our schools.
I just want to add a couple of things. If you notice the goal in the example just given, that's a rather audacious goal to achieve, and that's one of the things that we're working to do is to have the expectations be much more ambitious than previously they might have been, the 3% gain, 5% gain, and also the fact that the team works very closely together to be sure that vertical alignment is in place. It works so much better with continuity across the grade levels.
And I will not go into specific for the sake of time, but we all support each other in the work that we do.
So Charleston's trying to get its theory of what we believe about continuous improvement. That's what school districts across this country, many of them are working on, not all of them, but many. They're trying to say, okay, what are the levers we can put in place? What are those hinge points? What can we monitor? What can we expect to really support continuous improvement? And the very last slide is sort of like a launch of the major pieces of work. And all the while we're rolling this PDSA out, we plan to make sure Emily Woody's team knows what's in the PDSA. Buffy Roberts' team with assessment and evaluation will make sure we know what data to look at what month. Robin Jones's team will support through the virtual school. She will know what our weak points are in the district and how her team can support. Rich Gordon, CTE, will know what metrics we want to look at for CTE. So all of those folks in learning services are going to collaboratively work together, and again, we're tightening up the expectations, the processes, the procedures, and the routines, and we're going to look for change. When these principals come in, we're going to say, what are you changing? Before, Joe said something to me today, was that we asked them what they were going to do.
But we never asked them, what are you going to change? And I think that's really powerful, because what we find is that a lot of times principals will have some things to put in place when they start thinking about their continuous improvement audit, but sometimes they're repeating some of the same things that they've done in the past. So you have to ask them, what are you going to change and not what are you going to do? Because a lot of times what you do may have already been done, and we don't see the impacts that we need on student outcomes. So that's the terminology that we're looking to use on next year. What are you going to change? And of course, when you can do those things, we need to know you're going to change something first.
We will have a team that reads these PDSA plans that's across the division in learning services and outside the division. We will set aside a day or days where we read these. These schools will get feedback, and we will have to know their data before we give them the feedback. We have to know what their data say. We have to know which school has a weakness in what area, and we have to make sure that they target that weakness. And so that's it in a nutshell, and we'll take any questions you might have.
Kate has a question, and then
So help me to understand what you all have talked about. Give me an example of what all these different steps, what will change, what might change, as Joe said, for a student in a classroom. I mean, what's a specific kind of example that you could give me on what would be different once we're doing this? What would be different for a student in the classroom?
I'll start and then I'll ask them to jump in, but the example that we gave you, that school's problem, when you're not growing your students and you're below average on the state SC Ready, and yeah, the student progress is the category. When you're below average or average, you're not growing your students. So if you're not growing the students, you're probably teaching in the middle, or teaching at the low end, or teaching at the high end, but you're not meeting every student where he or she is. So we expect to see differentiation strategies. That might be in middle school, a flex period. Dr. Williams really likes schools to build in a segment of time, and I'll let him talk about that in just a moment, where they really go in there and they either enrich or remediate, or they reteach, they pre-teach. He likes to see that in the schools that might have gaps in where their students are and where they should be, or where they want them to be. The other thing would be small group instruction. Do you have time where it's not just all whole group, it's some small group instruction that's tailored? You may have regrouping. Lisa Allison and her team's been working on interventions where teachers trade students during a period of the day so that they go to another classroom. They're calling it walk to read, where if I'm reading below level, I have a period of time that maybe 30 minutes where a teacher's teaching me on my level. Yeah, they're exposing me to grade level content, but they're also filling in any gaps I might have. So it's that adaptive digital content's another way to do that, because adaptive digital content will serve the student where he or she is. So those would be the things we've got to identify that root cause, and this is an example, and then we've got to make sure the strategies line up with the root cause. And I'll ask this team to add anything they would.
So I can chime in.
Go ahead.
So I can chime in first and go back or piggyback on what Cindy just said about the flex or intervention period at the middle school level. One of the things that we know is that when you get into a school, and I hate to use this terminology, but it's the best way to help you understand, that's upside down, where you have more kids coming in that are below grade level that you do coming in that are on or exceeding the grade level standards. You know that 2 or 3 intervention teachers in the building cannot help you address that problem. So a lot of research we've seen have talked about school-wide interventions. As a result of walking around to some schools, you see that it's present in some schools and it's not in others. But the other piece on top of that is that even though it's present, sometimes they're not doing what they should during that period. So that was one of the things that I put on my my SOPs for next year, and also thinking about what's done in those classrooms during that time period, working with Lisa Allison's department to make sure we have some solid programs inside of those classrooms to help impact student outcomes. So that's sort of where we are as level leaders when we talk about, how does this make sense, or how does this look on next year? So just identifying some things that we know we did not see in place across all schools, and making sure that we have them in place in schools that need them. And another example is that Michelle and I participated in AASA and Institute for developing individuals that coach principals. And my focus principal was Dr. Knauer at Northwoods. A part of our process was that we performed learning walks. And so when I left, I said, you know what, I would like for you to do this with your admin staff. Go on some learning walks, identify your areas of opportunity, identify areas of strength. So if you have a teacher that's really good, you can get other teachers to go in and observe that teacher. But after I left and she participated in that process, she and her team identified that there were some issues with differentiation, but also depth of knowledge. So what she did was they looked at their lesson plan template and decided they could create a lesson plan template that they would kind of pilot this year with a few teachers, and then look at making some changes, implementing that on next year. So here again, that was a process that they utilized that was successful for them, that we're looking at spreading across all schools next year. So I'm getting the buzz.
Cool. Okay, those are great examples. That's what I was looking for. I just have a quick follow-up question. So I know a lot of, and I'm not going to put anybody in the spot, but a lot of board members go and visit schools. And we had some board members who visited a high school, and they went into a 10th grade social studies classroom, and the rigor just wasn't there. They were doing fill in the blanks. And some of the content somebody didn't have right. So how do we, and I've heard a couple of other examples of somebody teaching something in 8th grade that should be taught in 10th grade. How are we fixing that?
Well, I would like for Sharon Randall to talk to you about some collaborative work she did with the principals and a lead teacher. We don't have instructional coaches at all the high schools, but she did have them bring in someone with them, and I'd like for her to talk about how she worked a little bit on rigor, and then I'll go back to the curriculum part.
Right. We have been working this year with some of the, through the principals, to impact some teachers and instructional coaches for that very reason. But I did want to piggyback on what's already been said. Part of the goal for next year is to have principals fine-tune what their focus is, because often it tends to be so spread out that it's not really impactful. So yes, one of the areas for high school is that rigor piece that we're going to drill in and really hit hard with progress monitoring. But getting the different groups, whether it's in learning services or across learning services, with everybody understanding just those simple goals is a huge step forward, and we are really counting on that to have the most impact in the coming year. But that having the principals and the teachers ask for a training on rigor and figuring out the rigor level of assessments that they create is a wonderful example of that for this year, and we hope to expand that for next year.
And I'll add that we look at the how and the what. The what being the most important starting point. What's the curriculum? Emily Woody's team's working on defining that curriculum, and her district-based instructional facilitators are out working with our schools. This is the first year, this current year, that we've ever had that in that form since I've been here. Maybe we may have had it at some point in time, but we may have also lost it because we just had a different model. Also the how. What are the instructional strategies? How do you really impact what's happening in that classroom? And we believe that instructional coaches that are in the budget for high school will make a tremendous difference. When we can pull them from the high school monthly, so right now we're pulling them with the principal for principal meetings, and Emily has a separate meeting day. They come in and they work with the district-based team, and they're constantly talking about rigorous assessments, they're talking about curriculum, they're talking about instructional strategies and supports, how to support new teachers, how to support struggling teachers. Those are the kinds of things that Emily Woody focuses on with her team.
And that alignment, without that alignment, it wouldn't work.
Okay, do we have all the right leaders in place in each of the buildings?
Well, leaders is a broad term.
But I do respect
to
what Mr. Gary's
principals.
saying is, I've been sitting here Googling student achievement accountability, and I would ask you guys to go look at your presentations to us in December of 2017, January of 2018, and March of 2018. I've been looking at what you said was going to happen at the end of this school year if those things weren't implemented right. Todd and I kind of want to know, are you saying all that got done right, so you've changed your mind and you're going to do this stuff now? Because we're not here. We heard this at the beginning of last year, and now we're getting a presentation that says we're going to do this starting next year. What happened this year for the folks that did or didn't meet these kinds of goals and strategies you guys laid out for us in March of 2018?
So this is not, I think I shared at the beginning, and if I didn't, I should have. All this is not new. We did version 1.0, we're trying to take it to version 2.0.
I think what we want to know is, what'd you accomplish with 1.0 in terms of student achievement and getting the right leaders in the building for next year?
I'll let them talk about coaching. We have been coaching.
But let Todd.
Yeah, but I mean, my point, I'm just looking through, like, for example, I'm looking at one elementary school that 1.2% of the African-American students are reading on, and with a size, I'm not picking out outliers, I'm picking up ones with a sizable population, performing, meeting and exceeding the grade level at a, high school average. 9.3% of our African-American students are college-ready by our testing, but some schools, it's 7%, it's 6.8%. I mean, are we addressing that? Obviously, the high school is at the end of the road, but do we have the right leaders in place in each of them?
Not knowing exactly what school you're speaking of, but I know the type of school who has that data similar to what you just described.
Right.
And those schools have either a brand new principal installed for this year, or one who's just on her second, a year and a half. She got installed mid-year. And so we have made leadership changes. But a part of, I think, the solution is also equipping our principals to be the instructional leaders. So we depend on the cadre of coaches from Emily Woody's staff, but the collaboration with the Tri-County Cradle to Career is to impact and to empower principals to go into a classroom like Ms. Darby just described and identify that deficiency herself or himself so that they can coach their teachers. And our charge then is to be in buildings enough where we can assist principals in identifying gaps or deficiencies in a way they can be impactful. So to answer, I think, both Ms. Darby and Mr. Garrett's question, we are fortifying our schools with the type of leader, the brand of leader that can identify gaps on the spot and do something about it. And so for principals who were deficient in categories at the end of 2018, they had goals established to prioritize work. And so support, professional development, that's the layer that the level leaders provide. And so at the end of 2019, we do expect to see a difference, incremental change. I know the small 3 to 5 point gain is insufficient at this point, so our goal is to accelerate the type of momentum and learning and achievement that's satisfactory to all of you and to us as well.
And I'll just add, I know they've had what the literature calls fierce conversations, and they're fierce because they address the elephant in the room. And if the elephant in the room is low student achievement, all of these individuals at this table have talked to me about that. And I know that they've gone out and met with their principals, and they've talked to them about where they were on the school report card. Working with Ms. Roberts, she told us or gave us the data on where we fell short, how many points they had to move. We've worked with Edward Boyd on data analysis. I know they've had some of those conversations, and it is now proof in the pudding. It is time for that rubber to hit the road.
And Mr. Tarn, as you look at, to answer your question also, as we look at as our leaders, sometimes we have to look at growing what we have. 'Cause
I
when we
completely agree.
constantly- When we constantly switch leaders, the teachers lose confidence in the building, and then they end up leaving the building. So, and sometimes we have to grow the leaders that we have, and other times it is necessary to change the leaders.
And I think, John, what we see in this answerability column is we've got fidelity. One of our key phrases next year will be fidelity. If you're an open court school, we expect fidelity. If you're a Bridges school, we expect fidelity. Not that we haven't, we're just going to get, version 2.0 is going to be a little more intentional.
Any other questions?
I have one. Will you still be doing student dashboards and requiring them to be done twice a year?
We still will. Our goal, I don't know that we'll get there next year, but eventually we want it to be live and interactive, like a real-time, not a PDF. Ms. Roberts has talked to me about that. We didn't think the vendor was going to be able to get us there next year, but long-term, we'd like for it to be ongoing, and a parent could log in and actually see the progress his or her child's making.
And that's admirable, but the board approved and gave y'all funding and the access and the ability to do it twice a year with parent meetings in the middle of the year. We didn't do that this year. Did we do that in December of this year, with every teacher met with every student?
Every teacher met with every student. I'll have to ask Ms. Roberts what time of the year that happened.
Okay.
Because at the moment, I'm just.
And that's going to continue?
It was October. We did it October, and then we reissued them in the middle.
About a month or so ago.
Yep, I got mine.
Okay. And we had a presentation, one last question. We had a presentation from a principal last spring, and I honestly, it's a downtown elementary school, but it had an amazing program and process for data monitoring. That was the word that y'all used. And what they had was a room where they had all the students' achievement consistently on the walls, and they were constantly going through there. Well, that was spring of last year. Did that get rolled out in every elementary school this school year? Do we have those kinds of intensive data rooms that were described then? I want to say Mitchell, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was Mitchell.
So data walls, data notebooks are the standard and expectation for every.
And are they being executed with fidelity this year?
Yes, so they look a little different from building to building, and so a part of our work is to make it standardized, but everybody has a wall, everybody has data binders, and are able to speak to the data. We still want to grow our individuals and our leaders in terms of, now you know the data, what are you going to do about it meaningfully? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. I have a request. We did not get this electronically.
We've never seen that.
I did, but
No,
nobody else did.
I'm so sorry.
Can you send it to us, please?
Yes, I thought it went out Friday. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
all of you, and the people back there, too. Thank you.